So ASF is now endemic, really no chance of eradicating the virus from the island, at least in the near future. And so USDA is in the process of transferring disease control responsibilities to the Dominican Republic. However, they are going to continue to engage with the officials down there, offering assistance in a couple of really important and key ways. The first being diagnostic assistance. So this will include things like validating equipment and supplying materials for sample collection. That's important for the U.S. because we're still going to maintain access to some of the diagnostic information and data, which will only continue to help us in kind of tracking the virus, but also with our diagnostics.
Welcome to the Swine Health Blackbelt Podcast, the latest swine health research digested for you. My name is Dr. Clayton Johnson. I'm the host of the podcast, and joining me back in our studios for another podcast is Dr. Anna Forseth. Dr. Forseth was with us last week as we started our discussion on African Swine Fever, and really Dr. Forseth gave us a nice global overview of where ASF is and in particular where it's close to the United States. I would encourage everyone in the audience, if you haven't listened to that episode yet, go back to last week's episode, and probably worth listening to that one before we get into this one. But Anna, for folks that maybe have not listened to that first one and are not going to follow that advice and they're just going to plow through this one, why don't we start with an introduction for everybody who hasn't met you?
Sounds great. Thanks, Clayton, again for inviting me back. Anna Forseth, I'm a veterinarian with the National Pork Producers Council, and I focus on pre-harvest issues for the council. This would include activities related to foreign swine disease prevention and preparedness, as well as welfare, biotech, gene editing issues.
Excellent. Well, let's dive right into it, Anna. You gave us a wonderful overview on the WOA reports, and I appreciate your highlighting that we've got over 1 million pigs that have been identified with ASF, this year, and we feel like that's dramatically underreporting. And most concerning is we have ASF in an endemic situation just a couple hours plane flight away from the continental United States, and even closer to Puerto Rico. We've got it in Hispaniola, and appreciate all your insight into that in the first episode. Let's shift focus a little bit, Anna, and talk to us, if you would, about U.S. preparedness and prevention efforts. I know there's probably some people that have fatigue with ASF, right? They're like, well, I've heard about this forever, and you silly vets, this is never going to happen. Hang in there, folks. Fight the good fight, because we don't want it to happen. But Anna, talk to us. What are you and other folks in the industry doing to help prevent ASF from coming here and prepare us for if and when we do have to fight that battle?
Yeah, no, I appreciate, again, the opportunity to share some of the work that's being done. I could probably spend several hours talking with you and the audience about industry activities. So I'll try to do my best to summarize. So hang with me here. Let me just jump back for those who maybe weren't on or didn't listen to podcast number 1 and reference just a little bit of work that's being done. A lot of work that's being done by USDA APHIS. So as we talked about on podcast number 1, we are considering the situation in the Dominican Republic and on the island of Hispaniola as a whole to be endemic. So ASF is now endemic, really no chance of eradicating the virus from the island, at least in the near future. And so USDA is in the process of transferring disease control responsibilities to the Dominican Republic. However, they are going to continue to engage with the officials down there, offering assistance in a couple of really important and key ways. The first being diagnostic assistance. So this will include things like validating equipment and supplying materials for sample collection. That's important for the U.S. because we're still going to maintain access to some of the diagnostic information and data, which will only continue to help us in kind of tracking the virus, but also with our diagnostics and whatnot. They're also going to continue to support ports of entry. And so they've got detector dogs on the ground now, which they didn't have before, looking for pork products. Clayton, the number of pork products that are identified in pre-departure screening by these dogs would both shock you and concern you, but also make you very happy at the same time. These dogs are doing a great job of identifying product before those folks even leave the country. And this really alleviates some of the pressure on Customs and Border Protection once they arrive to the United States. So I wanted to start by offering a couple of additional details on efforts that are underway by USDA APHIS with those CCC monies that we referenced on podcast number 1. But this really is an effort that takes all of us, from state and federal officials to industry. And so let me just switch gears and talk some about some of the activities underway that are being led by industry. Following the detection of African swine fever in the DR in 2021, the National Pork Board and the National Pork Producers Council Board of Directors gathered and identified 6 key areas in which to focus preparedness and prevention efforts. And to summarize, those include harmonizing federal and state response plans, providing producers and herd veterinarians information about what to do on farm, maximizing surveillance for African swine fever, seeing the U.S. SHIP program through to a permanent USDA program. There's 2 more. Working to assure some certainty to producers of fair indemnity and potentially other market support programs, and then develop plans to expedite the return to trade. So hopefully, as you and your audience can appreciate, there are a lot of different ways to try to make progress in these areas. And we've been prioritizing this and working really hard to advance some of these areas over the last 3 years.
And Anna, I really appreciate that. One of the concerning parts to me about preparedness and prevention is it would really be nice to have a better, more accurate picture of where ASF is active throughout the globe. You mentioned when we were talking in last week's episode about the WOA reporting and the underreporting that's out there. Is there any opportunity to improve the reporting process for countries that maybe are just choosing not to participate? It feels like the United States kind of plays by the rules with this, but not everybody plays by the rules, including some of our major trade partners, right? Is there anything out there, carrots or sticks, that WOA has available to it to say, no, if you have ASF, you're actually going to report it?
That's a really good question. And I think that over time, people understand the benefits of complying with WOA standards and rules. I think for countries that have chosen to participate, that maybe rely on the export market for their industry, they find, and using this as one example, but they find that the opportunities available to them to maintain or resume trade is really, only an option for those that are following the rules. And so there's only so much that one country can do, or even the World Organization for Animal Health can do to try to encourage or require certain countries to comply. But again, it's if you comply, then the opportunities to you and your country and your country's industry are more than those that aren't.
Yeah, but if you're not selling meat on the global market, if you're not an exporter of pork, I would imagine then that kind of hinders the incentive part to make sure your status is correct and up to date.
Salmonella presents significant challenges to pig health and performance and poses food safety risks to humans. As the first and only vaccine offering live attenuated strains of both Salmonella cholerae and Typhimurium, Enterosol Salmonella TC from Boehringer Ingelheim protects pigs against both serotypes with a single oral dose, Talk to your Boehringer Ingelheim representative to learn more.
Anna, what is the industry program that you think needs producers' attention most right now? What is the thing that you would say we're at, 60% participation rate? And I'm thinking things like AgView, right? Secure pork, stuff like that producers can do today. Preparedness, programs they can get in today so that if we woke up tomorrow to bad news, we don't have 20 to 30 to 40% of the industry to maybe 90% of the industry that has to get their paperwork in order, has to get their process documentation in order. Are there any programs out there that you would call out and tell our audience and say, listen, if your farms aren't signed up for this, they need to be right now? Anything like that you highlight?
I'm going to highlight three, if I could. I would start with secure pork supply. I think that was a great example that you shared, and we're finding that more and more people refer to secure pork supply, specifically the biosecurity components. And moving forward, we're trying to do everything we can to make sure that we leverage programs that already exist. So, for example, with the Swine Health Improvement Plan program, we looked to leverage, from biosecurity perspective, the biosecurity requirements that are in the secure pork supply plan. And so I think, producers should really, if they haven't already from a biosecurity standpoint, get on the website, open that document, and really identify opportunities to improve their biosecurity and to become as compliant as possible with the recommendations that are in there, because I do think there's going to be a heavy reliance on biosecurity should we get into a situation where we're trying to manage a foreign swine disease. The second thing that I mentioned, and you use it as another example, would be AgView, or more broadly, traceability. Hopefully many of the individuals listening to the podcast today will recall a really big push to improve our live swine traceability program over the last year and a half to 2 years. So if that isn't familiar to you, or you need a refresher, you can certainly access some more information on NPPC's website or through your state pork association. But one of the components of the improvements to traceability does include electronically readable and shareable traceability movement records. And so AgView is a program that's been developed with checkoff dollars. If you're not familiar, would encourage you to check that out, because that has been part of the conversation on traceability over the last, again, couple of years. And then the third program would be the U.S. SHIP program that's making some significant progress in its codification to a USDA program. And in fact, we hope to see a final rule that will be open for comment here in the next few weeks. And so would encourage producers to get engaged, learn more about that program, talk to your state pork association or state veterinarian, because if the poultry industry has been any indicator of the value of such a program, I think that we could throw a lot of our eggs into the SHIP basket, because it has allowed them to maintain trade throughout this high path avian influenza situation. And that would be of great value to us should we get ASF.
Excellent summary. Those three things: producers, veterinarians, allied industry. If you're still out there saying, oh, this is all alphabet soup and I don't know how it works, I'm telling you, you are getting behind the eight ball, significantly behind. So I appreciate that summary, Anna. Thank you very much for coming on, sharing a global update last week, and then talking about what we're doing here in the U.S. and how producers can help to prepare for this if and when we do have to fight it. Thanks so much for coming on. I really appreciate that information.
Yep. Thanks again for the opportunity.
Yeah, well, thanks to our audience, Anna. This opportunity would not be here if we didn't have them tuning in and listening to the content. Really appreciate everybody for checking out the podcast. If you would, like and subscribe to the podcast if you haven't already. Forward it to a friend if you think this episode is worth them listening. We really appreciate that. And for Dr. Anna Forseth, I'm Dr. Clayton Johnson. It's been our honor to host the Swine Health Blackbelt Podcast. We appreciate you listening, and we hope you have a great rest of your day.
Hey, everybody. We're always searching for the latest and greatest research to share each week. If you have a swine health related research trial and would like to come on the show and talk about it, share it with us, please feel free to email the research to hello@wisenetics.com. That's HELLO WISENETIX.com.